Hey guys, would it be possible if we did a colorless goblin noise?
Shut up, Jerry.
Hey gang, just to let you know, you can now use the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, at flipsidegaming.com and originalmagicart.store. Using the code gets you 10% off orders $10 or more, and you get to help out the channel at the same time. Also, I want to bring to your attention the Kickstarter from Original Magic Art, where they're trying to get some sweet Commander/EDH generals onto playmats. He's directly working with the artists, so you'll be able to help support them, and if you use the affiliate link below, you'll also be able to help support me and get your hands on some of these sweet playmats. I also want to let you guys know that Flipside Gaming is doing another giveaway, this time for a box of Ultimate Masters. Anyone who uses my promo code MTGMudsta for orders over $10 or more will be entered to win. There's one entry per person, so I wish you good luck, and please be sure to let me know what box topper you get when you win. This week, we have Rick, who's new to the channel, playing Edgar Markov, and he keeps Blood Tracker, Olivia Mobilized for War, Dark Imposter, Blind Obedience, Flooded Strand, Command Tower, and Fetid Heath. Jonathan, who you'll remember from before, is playing his Estrid deck, keeping Enchantress's Presence, Azorius Chancery, Reliquary Tower, Estrid's Invocation, Forest, Thalia's Lancers, and Swords to Plowshares. Kirsten is playing her Hanna Ship's Navigator deck, keeping a Thopter Squadron, Glass Dusk Hulk, Shimmermere, Master Trinketeer, Island, Seed of Synod, and Plains. Lastly, Tal is playing his Regna and Krav deck again, keeping Sorin, Lord of Innistrad, Crested Sunmare, Path of Bravery, Pristine Talisman, Field of Ruin, and 2 Plains. Tal wins the die roll and starts us off. Tal plays a tapped Memorial to Glory, passing. Rick plays a Flooded Strand, and passes. He cracks it, taking 1 to find a Sacred Foundry, and having it come into play tapped. Kirsten plays a Seed of the Synod and passes. Jonathan plays a Forest and passes. Tal plays a Plains and he also passes. Rick plays a Command Tower and casts Blind Obedience. Kirsten plays a Plains and passes. John plays a Reliquary Tower, passing. Tal plays a Swamp and he casts a Pristine Talisman, which comes in tapped, and he passes to Rick. Rick plays an Isolated Chapel, and Rick then casts Olivia Mobilized for War, and gets a 1/1 black vampire token from Edgar Markov's Eminence ability. Kirsten plays a Master Trinketeer in her main phase, which comes in tapped, and passes. John plays an Island, and drops an Enchantress's Presence. Tal plays a Field of Ruin, and pays 5, gaining 1 life from the Talisman to cast a tapped Crested Sunmare. At the beginning of his end step, Tal gains a Horse token, which comes in tapped. Rick plays a Fetid Heath, and pays 4 to cast a Blood Tracker. He gains another vampire token as he casts the creature, and he uses Olivia's trigger as it enters the battlefield, discarding a Clifftop Retreat to give the Blood Tracker haste and a +1/+1 counter. He then moves to combat, swinging 1 creature per opponent, dealing 1 to Kirsten and 3 to Tal and Jonathan. Kirsten plays an Evolving Wilds and casts a Shimmermere. It comes in tapped, and she then cracks her Wilds while passing to Jonathan. Jonathan casts Estrid's Invocation in his main phase, drawing from the Presence trigger. He then plays an Azorius Chancery, bouncing his island, and passes. Tal plays a Godless Shrine untapped, taking 2, and he casts Path to Bravery. He then moves to combat, swinging both the token and the Sunmare at Rick, and gains 2 life. Rick blocks 1 of the horses and takes 5. Tal then moves to his end step and gains another horse token that comes in tapped. Rick plays an Arid Mesa, and he casts a Dark Imposter, extorting the vampire. This has him drain his opponents for 1 while Rick gains 3. Rick also gains another vampire token from Edgar's Eminence trigger. Moving to combat, Rick swings Olivia and the Blood Tracker at Tal for 6. Kirsten draws for turn, and she plays a Plains. She then passes to Jonathan. Jonathan decides not to bounce his Invocation, and casts an Oath of Jace in his main phase. He draws 2 from the Presence triggers, and then draws 3 and discards 2. Jonathan then plays a Plains, and he passes. At the end of Jonathan's second main phase, Tal taps his Pristine Talisman to gain 1, which gives him another tapped horse at the end of turn thanks to the Sunmare. Tal draws and plays a Plains. He then pays 4 to cast Sorin, Lord of Innistrad, and downticks the Walker to make an emblem that gives all of his creatures +1/+0. He then moves to combat and swings the Sunmare and 2 of the tokens at Rick. Tal gains 3 life with the Path to Bravery trigger, and Rick blocks the 2 tokens, taking 6 from the Sunmare. Tal then moves to his end step, gaining another horse token, and Rick also cracks his Arid Mesa to go and find a Smoldering Marsh. Rick plays a Wooded Foothills as his land for turn, and he moves to combat. He swings Olivia at Soren to take out Tal's Planeswalker before he can make any more emblems. Rick then passes, and at the end of turn, Kirsten flashes in the Thopter Squadron. Kirsten draws for her turn, and passes to Jonathan. Jonathan casts an Awakening Zone in his main phase, drawing 2 from his Enchantress's Presence triggers. He plays a tapped Krosan Verge as his land for turn, and passes. At the end of Jonathan's second main phase, Tal taps the Talisman to gain 1 life, but Rick responds to the Gain Life trigger, and cracks his Wooded Foothills to find a plateau. He then activates the Dark Imposter to exile the Sunmare. Tal draws for turn and plays a Plains. He then casts Soul's Attendant that comes in tapped, and he casts a Ravos Soul Tender, gaining a life as it comes in. Moving to combat, Tal swings 4 horses at Rick, and gains 4 life from the horses swinging. Feeling like he'll be the next target once Rick is dead, Jonathan decides to help Rick out by casting Swords to Plowshares, targeting Tal's Ravos. Ravos gets exiled, and Tal gains 3 more life. Rick then blocks one of the horses with a Blood Tracker, and takes 21 damage, and draws a card as the Blood Tracker dies. Rick plays a Vault of the Archangel as his land for turn, and he casts Return to Dust, extorting it. He hits Tal's Path and Talisman, and passes. At the end of Rick's turn, Kirsten flashes in Glass Dusk Hulk. Kirsten draws but can't seem to find lands. She moves to combat and hits Tal for 4 with a Thopter Squadron. Kirsten then casts a Trinket Mage to go and find an Everflowing Chalice, putting it to her hand and passing to Jonathan. Jonathan gains an Eldrazi spawn token on his upkeep and draws for turn. He sacrifices the spawn and taps his tower to crack the Verge, grabbing the 2 cycle lands from Amonkhet. John then plays a Tranquil Cove as his land for turn and gains 1 life. Tal draws and goes to combat. He swings his horses at Jonathan, who has the perfect answer with the Timely Aetherize, a card I loved in Gatecrash Limited. Tal then places Scoured Barrens in his second main phase, gaining 1 life. He then brings out Regna and gains 1 life as she enters. He then moves to his end step, and Tal gains 2 tapped warrior tokens from Regna's trigger. Rick plays a Temple of Silence, scrying the top card and bottoming it. He then passes, and at the end of turn, Kirsten flashes in her Everflowing Chalice, but only kicks it once. Kirsten draws for turn, and passes. Jonathan gets a tapped Eldrazi spawn on his upkeep, and Tal remembers his Addendant trigger, and this time gains 1. Jonathan then casts Estrid in his main phase, and downticks her to give his Azorius Chancery a totem token. Jonathan then sacrifices the token, and pays the rest in lands to cast Narset Transcendent. He upticks her, and it's not a non-creature, so he leaves it there. He then plays a Meandering River as his land for turn, and moving to his end step, Rick exiles Regna with the Dark Imposter. Tal plays an Ifnir Deadlands as a land for turn, and he moves to combat. He swings his Soul Attendant at Estrid, and the 2 soldier tokens at Rick, who blocks both warriors. In Tal's second main phase, he activates and sacrifices the Deadlands to finish off the Dark Imposter with some -1/-1 counters. For Rick's turn, he casts Authority of the Consuls and extorts it. He then casts an Edgar Markov, extorting it as well. He responds to Olivia's ability and discards a Swamp to give Edgar Markov a +1/+1 counter and haste even though he already had haste. Tal also gains 1 life from the Soul's Attendant trigger, and Rick then moves to combat. Rick swings everything at Narset and gets to put a +1/+1 counter on all of his 2 creatures from Edgar's attack trigger. At the end of turn, Kirsten flashes in Trading Post and removes a counter from the squadron to make a Thopter, which she can't technically do because it's only at sorcery speed, but we miss it. This gains Rick and Tal life as it enters, and we move to Kirsten's turn. Kirsten draws and moves to combat. She swings the squadron and the Thopter at Tal for 5, and passes turn. John gains his Eldrazi token, and Tal and Rick gain 1. He sacrifices the token to cast a Reefworm, and Tal and Rick gain another life. Jonathan then casts Kiora the Crashing Wave, and upticks the Walker to prevent all damage that Edgar Markov would do until his next turn. Jonathan then plays an island, and passes. Tal casts Regna in his main phase, and he and Rick gain 1 life. Tal then passes through his phases, and gains 2 warrior tokens at the end of turn, gaining both he and Rick another 2 life. Rick casts a Blood Artist in his main phase, and gets a Vampire token from the Eminence trigger. He and Tal both gain 2 life, and Rick moves to combat. He swings Olivia at Kiora, and Edgar at Kirsten. The Edgar Markov attack trigger happens, and Kiora dies, while Kirsten takes 0 from Edgar because of Kiora's ability still. At the end of Rick's turn, Kirsten flashes in Stuffy Doll, and she names Tal as it enters, and Tal and Rick gain 1. Tal then gains 2 more warrior tokens at the end of turn, and they both gain 2 more life. Kirsten plays a Temple of the False God as their land for turn. and then pays 4 to cast a Treasure Keeper, and Tal and Rick gain 1. This triggers the Glass Dust Hulk, which pumps it by +1/+1 and makes it unblockable. She swings it at Rick for 4 and a Thopter at Tal for 2. At the end of her turn, Tal gains 2 more warrior tokens and gains 2 more life alongside Rick. Jonathan casts an Oath of Nissa in his main phase, drawing 2 from the presence triggers. He then looks at the top 3 and reveals Tamiyo from the 3. Jonathan then plays a forest for his land for turn, and he sacrifices the spawn to help pay for Tamiyo, but it's stopped by Kirsten with a Fuel for Cause, which lets her proliferate her Thopter squadron. Jonathan then plays a tapped Thalia's Lancers, and Rick and Tal gain 1 life, while John goes to find a card. Jonathan reveals an Oath of Teferi, confirming that he's playing Oath Tribal. At the end of Jonathan's turn, Tal gains 2 more warrior tokens, and he and Rick gain 2 more life. Tal draws for turn and casts a Requiem Angel in his main phase, gaining he and Rick another life. Tal then casts his own Blind Obedience, so things enter triple tapped. He swings everything at Rick, who stops 1 soldier with his vampire token, and then takes 19. With the warrior token dying, Tal gets a spirit token, and he and Rick gain another life. Rick also has 2 Blood Artist triggers, and he uses them to drain Tal for 2. Tal then moves to his end step, gaining 2 warrior tokens, and he and Rick gain 2 more life. Rick draws and swings everything he has at Tal. This triggers Edgar's ability, giving all of his vampires Rick controls a +1/+1 counter. Tal has no blockers, and before damage is dealt, Rick activates the Vault, dealing 16 and gaining 16. At the end of turn, Kirsten taps a Stuffy Doll to deal 1 to Tal. Kirsten draws for turn and sacrifices her Treasure Keeper to the trading post to draw a card. She resolves the Treasure Keeper trigger first and reveals until she hits a 3-drop, which is sadly Blue Sun Zenith. She casts it for 0 and shuffles it back in, then draws from the trading post trigger. She then casts a Wind Reader Sphinx, and Tal and Rick gain 1. Moving to combat, she swings the Squadron at Rick for 4 and the Lone Thopter at Tal for 2. She gets to draw 2 cards because the 2 creatures with flying are attacking from the Wind Reader Sphinx. At the end of her turn, Tal gains another 2 warriors, which has him and Rick gain 2 more life. Jonathan gains another Ajazi token, and Rick and Tal gain 1 life. He sacrifices it to make 1 colorless, and Rick drains Tal for 1 with the Blood Artist trigger. Jonathan then casts an Oath of Teferi, drawing 2 cards as it enters, and flickering his Thalia's Lancers. He then plays Jace the Mind Sculptor, and uses the Brainstorm ability, drawing 3 and putting back 2. Jonathan then plays the Evolving Wilds he has in hand, cracking it to find a basic forest, and shuffles. He then activates Jace's Brainstorm again. We then see Jonathan casting a Verdant Haven, gaining 2 life, and drawing 2 from the presences. Jonathan then passes turn, returning the Thalia's Lancers. This lets him tutor for a legendary, while Rick and Tal gain 1, and Tal gains another 2 warrior tokens at the end of turn, which has him and Rick gain 2 more life. John settles for an Avacyn Angel of Hope and puts it to his hand. Tal draws for turn and swings all of his tokens plus the Requiem Angel at Jonathan, and Regna at Rick for 5. Jonathan unfortunately dies to the attack, and in his second main phase, Tal casts Krav, gaining 1 life for he and Rick as the demon enters. Tal then moves to his end step, gaining 2 warriors and 2 life for he and Rick. Rick plays a Rugged Prairie and moves to combat. He swings Edgar at Tal, gaining his commander another +1/+1 counter. Tal responds before moving to blockers by sacrificing a creature to Craft's ability, gaining 1 life, drawing a card, and giving his second half of a commander a +1/+1 counter. Tal then blocks with his Soul's Attendant and gains a spirit token when it dies, while Rick drains him for 1. Rick then passes. Kirsten starts her turn off by casting Pariah onto Edgar Markov. She then swings the Thopter and the Thopter Squadron at Tal for 5, and draws 2 cards from her Wind Reader Sphinx's triggers. She passes, and at the end of her turn, Tal activates Krav to sacrifice 5 warrior tokens, gaining 5 life, drawing 5 cards, and giving his commander 5 more counters. He also gains 5 spirit tokens from the Requiem Angel, which gives Rick 5 life, but it also allows Rick to drain him for 5 because the warriors died. Tal plays a Chefnet Dunes as a land for turn, and he casts Return to Dust in his main phase, exiling Rick's Blind Obedience and Authority of Consuls. Tal then activates and sacrifices his Dunes, giving his whole board +1/+1 until end of turn. He swings everything at Rick, who knows he's dead, and Tal then passes. Kirsten draws and casts a Skull Clamp, equipping it onto the Thopter, which doesn't die because of the Master Trinketeer. She then passes to Tal. Tal draws for turn and plays a Swamp. He then casts Settle the Score to exile Kirsten's Wind Reader Sphinx because he's not keen on her drawing 8 cards when he swings with the spirits. Kirsten responds by flashing in a Voltaic Key, which comes in tapped, and the Sphinx gets exiled. Tal then moves to combat, swinging all of his tokens at Kirsten. She blocks as much as she can, which has her creatures dying, including the Clampthopter, which has her drawing 2. Tal also takes 2 from the Stuffy Doll trigger as it blocked a warrior token, and Kirsten drops to 13. Tal also gains 2 spirit tokens as 2 of his warriors died. Tal then pays 1 black to sacrifice all of his tokens, putting himself to 52 life and drawing a boatload of cards. He doesn't even need to draw them though, as he casts Aetherflux Reservoir from hand, which he'd drawn for turn, and he pays 50 life to close out the game. Game review time. So if you've ever considered editing a game where there's a lot of incremental life gain, please don't. It's awful. That being said, it was super cool to see how easily Rick was able to come back from very low life, and Tal never seemed to hover much lower than 30. Unfortunately for Jonathan, he did seem to draw a lot of cards early on, which is fantastic, but he wasn't able to get anything relevant until later on, at which point Tal and Rick had a huge board to deal with his planeswalkers, so they basically came onto the board, activated once, and then died. Kirsten, on the other hand, seemed to be operating very much as a conservative player, keeping cards in her hand until she absolutely needed them, and flashing them in on other people's turns. This playstyle worked quite well for her in the last game, but unfortunately Tal's massive army was more than enough for her. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/mtgmudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/mtgmudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.